Welcome to the eighth week of our online learning. My beloved eighth graders, how have you been? Hope you've been studying. Hope you've been understanding. Please don't fail to contact me where you're confused. Now, before we go into the topic of today, we shall be running through the topics we've done since the beginning of this online learning. Now, in the first week, we talked about diatonic scale, chromatic scale, and the pentatonic scale. In the second week, we looked into primary notes of a major scale. Remember, we talked about we also talked about the technical names. Where we talked about the tonic, supertonic, median, subdominant, dominant, submediant, leading notes, and octave. Now we said that some notes are known as the primary notes, while others are known as the secondary notes. Now we said that the primary notes are tonic, subdominant, dominant, and octave. And we say apart from this, the rest were secondary notes. Then after that, we did musical terms, signs, and abbreviations, where we showed some signs like the lunga pulsar, the dal segno, the dal capo, and the rest of them. After that, in the fourth week, we did transcription from staff to sulfur, and in the fifth week, we did transcription again from sulfur to staff. And the sixth week came our quiz. Then after our quiz was the seventh week, and we did keyboard setting, tones, semitones, and enharmonic notes. Notes that are bearing different name but the same sound. Different name but the same sound. Now this week we shall be treating intervals, major and minor intervals. This week we shall be treating intervals, the major and minor intervals. Now, at the end of this lesson, the student should be able to one, define interval. The student should be able to tell me what an interval is. Secondly, they should be able to differentiate between a melodic and harmonic interval. The student should be able to differentiate between a melodic interval and a harmonic interval. Thirdly, they should be able to describe how to determine quantity and quality. They should be able to describe how to determine the quantity and the quality. Fourthly, they should be able to differentiate between major and minor intervals. They should be able to differentiate between a major and a minor interval. Then finally, the student should be able to identify and name some major and minor intervals. Then now let's just have a quick recap of what the student should know at the end of this lesson. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to one, define an interval. Two, differentiate between melodic and harmonic interval. Three, describe how to determine quantity and quality. Four, differentiate between major and minor intervals. 5. Identify the name. Identify and name some major and minor intervals. So, what is an interval? What is an interval? An interval is the distance in pitch between two notes. It's as simple as that. The distance between two notes, for example, point A and point B. The difference between point A and point B is the interval. The distance between point A and point B is the interval. An interval is the difference, or you can say is the distance in pitch between two notes. The distance in pitch between two notes is an interval. Now, an interval can be melodic or harmonic, depending on how it is written or sounded. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. It's a melodic interval. Then when you have to see the notes in block form, in form of chord, remember we said that a chord is the agreement of two or more notes harmoniously. So when you see notes placed like that, you can call it a harmonic interval. But when they are placed in a straight line, it's a melodic interval. I hope we understand this. Now, an interval is melodic in if both notes are written or sounded after one another, just like I told you, in a straight line. Therefore, a melodic interval occurs when the first note is sounded or written separately from the second note. So if they are written in a line, it's melodic interval. But if the notes are written upwards, it is harmonic interval. Okay, let's see a good example of that. Now I want you to look closely at this. Now look at the melodic interval. You see re, so, fa. It's a melodic interval. Hmm? It's on a straight line. Why you see harmonic intervals, they are going up. Hmm? Two notes in one place, two notes in one place. Huh? Okay. So this is what a melodic interval is, and this is what a harmonic interval is. So let's talk more. Ways to determine ways to determine an interval. Ways to determine an interval. Remember, we said an interval is the distance in pitch between two notes. We said an interval is the distance in pitch between two notes. Okay. So let's look at ways to determine an interval. Now, there are two ways of determining types of interval. Hmm? Types of interval, there are two ways of determining it. And the first way is known as the quality, while the second way is known as the quantity. Okay, sorry. The first way is known as the quantity, while the second one is known as the quality. So let's talk about the quantity. Quantity has to do with number, while quality has to do with value. Now, numerically, an interval involves two notes. Yes, when you're talking about interval, two notes have to be involved. We also say that it is the distance, isn't it? Okay. Now, the upper and the lower notes. The upper and the lower notes. Now, I want you to just have a kind of uh, harmonic interval behind you, behind your reasoning. I said quantity of an interval depends on the number of letter names contained in the interval. That is, number of letter names from the lower notes to the upper notes. That's to say, for example, if you have G, you at the lower note you have G, and at the upper one you have A. The distance when you move from G to A is what? Is 2. So is GA. So you've moved twice. You've is two, only two are involved. So it's GA. So you call that a second. Now from G to D, you see G1, A2, B3, C4, D5. So it is called a fifth. Do you understand that to get the quantity, that is the distance between these two notes, you just need to check how far it has gone. G to A now means 1, 2. You've made from your home, you've made just 2 steps from G to A, which is a second. So if I ask you what is the quantity between G and A, you know it's a second. Or the quantity between G and D is a fifth. Now if I say from G to G is 8. Okay, let's move on. Quality. Now let's talk about the quality. An interval is determined by the number of semitones contained in it. Now remember, quantity talks about how you need to move, the number of the number of steps you take. But now this quality is talking about the number of semitones contained by an interval. First, there are four kinds of intervals. Please, I want you to have this at the back of your mind. There are four types of intervals. The first one is the major, the second one is the minor, the third one is the augmented interval, and the last one is the diminished interval. Now, we shall be explaining major interval and minor intervals in detail. Okay. The major interval. A major interval is more than a minor interval by a semitone. There are four major intervals. The first one is the major second. The second one is the major third. The third one is the major sixth, while the last one is the major seventh. So remember, there are four types of intervals, and there are also four types of major intervals. There are four types of major intervals, which is the major second, the major third, the major sixth, and the major seventh. For minor intervals, a minor interval is smaller than a major interval by a semitone. That's to say, if a major interval has two semitones, a minor interval will be having one semitone. Now remember, from E to F is a second, and it has just a semitone. So it is a minor interval. I hope you understand that. Calculate that. I hope you understand that. Okay. So the two ways of determining an interval, we say it was the quantity and the second was the quality. Now we say that the quantity has to do with how we did that, how we can calculate the distance moved, how we be able to calculate the distance. I would say when you move from G to A, it's a second. When you move from G to D, it's a fifth. Now for the quality, we're saying that it's calculated with the number of semitones. The number of semitones. So if you've moved from G to A, now what what's the amount of semitones between them? Is going to make it either a major interval or a minor interval. So an interval is determined by the number of semitones contained by the interval. Folks, we're told that there are four types of interval: the major, the minor, the augmented, and the diminished. Now, augmented simply means additional, the marginal, while diminished simply means reduction. So if it's supposed to have four semitones, and unfortunately it's having an extra semitone, it is called augmented. But if it's supposed to have four semitones and unfortunately it's having three, it is called diminished. Now a major interval is more than a minor interval by a semitone. There are four major intervals. The first one is the major second. The second one is the major third. The third one is the major sixth, while the last one is the major seventh. Now, a minor interval is smaller than the major interval by a semitone. Now, you see, the minor are smaller than the majors. There are four minor intervals: the the minor second, the minor third, the minor sixth, and the minor seventh. Now, this is a table of major intervals, major and minor intervals, and the number of semitones. Now, types of intervals, we already have the minor. The minor second has just one semitone, while the major second has two. The minor third has three semitones, while the major third has four. The minor sixth have eight, while the major has nine. The minor seventh has 10, while the major seventh has 11. 11. Okay, with this, we've come to the end of our lesson for today, but let's have a quick recap. Now, the students were taught the following: one, definition of an interval, and we defined an interval as the distance in pitch between two notes. So I believe you know the definition. It is the distance in pitch between two notes. Now, the difference between a melodic and a harmonic interval. We're told that the melodic interval are arranged in lines. If they are arranged in succession lines, do, re, mi, blah, 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 is known as a melodic interval. But if they are arranged upwards in block, they are known as harmonic intervals. How to determine quantity and quality. How to determine quantity and quality. And we said that the quantity has to do with the number of movements, while the quality has to do with the number of semitones. The number of semitones. Now, difference between the major and the minor interval. We said that the major interval is higher than the minor interval with a semitone. With a semitone. Now, how to identify and name major and minor intervals. This is it. This is it. Okay, with this, we've come to the end of our lessons for the week. Please, if there is any questions, don't fail to contact me. Don't fail to contact me. I'll always be there for you. So please try your best and see that you learn. We shall be having our second T and probably exams online. So please read hard.